colleges. And I will talk all about the process of applying to Ivy League and highly selective colleges. It is a little different than, applying to other schools. There's a lot of things that you should know about Ivy League schools and highly selective colleges. So let's dive in. So, about international college counselors and about me, we do help students from all over the world with everything related to educational planning and admissions. We do college and graduate school planning and guidance, including professional schools like medical school, dental school, veterinary, and then all kinds of graduate programs, anything you can imagine. We do school list and school selection. We help with extracurricular and academic interest refinement. I spend a lot of time kind of brainstorming with my students and coming up with creative ideas for them. We do essay editing, application review, interview prep. You receive guidance from expert advisors, and we pride ourselves on staying on top of all of the many, many changes that are involved in admissions and keeping families informed of those changes. My name is Kerri Medina, and I have been with, as we like to affectionately call it, ICC since 2013. And I have actually been a college advisor since 2001. I started out in Miami-Dade County Public Schools, and I was with MDCPS for quite a long time. And I've had acceptances to top schools, including Ivies, each and every year. Oops. Okay, so an overview. I'm sorry, an overview of what we do, or what we're going to talk about tonight, is gaining entry into Ivy League schools. If you have followed any admissions trends, you will know that every year it is more and more difficult to get into these upper tiered universities in particular. Every Ivy League school has seen significant increases and almost in the past few years, including last year, and many had their largest applicant pools ever, and subsequently their lowest admit rates in history. And so it's really important to keep that all in mind when your child is looking to apply to schools, or when you as a student are looking to apply to schools. Taken together, the 8 Ivy League schools, and we'll talk about what Ivy League means in a minute, received more than 401,000 applications for the class of 2027, and they accepted only 21,000 of those prospective students, meaning that their collective acceptance rate is about 5%. I like to, and my families that I work with know this about me. I have a term that I call Ivy League schools and other top tiered universities. When I'm working with a student, I don't use words like target or safety or any of those or reach. I don't use those words any longer. Instead, what I call them is highly rejective, because that's really, kind of what you're looking at. But just because they are harder to get into doesn't mean they are impossible to get into. And so we're going to get into what it takes to get into one of these schools. This is an overview of the 10-year difference between the class of 2017 and the class of 2027, which these are the latest admit rates that are available. But as you can see across the board, the numbers are staggering. I mean, there has been just such a giant increase in applications overall. And as you can see, along with those huge numbers of, huge increases, the admission rate has gone significantly down. Obviously, a school like a Harvard or even Columbia, their admission rate has gone down, I mean, exponentially. Although, even 10 years ago, they were really hard to get into. So what is the Ivy League, and why do we call it that? So the Ivy League has 8 member schools. It's Brown, Columbia, Cornell, Dartmouth, Harvard, the University of Pennsylvania, or as we like to call it, Penn, Princeton, and Yale. Um, Really, the Ivy League, though, is just a collegiate athletic conference. And the reason that they called it the Ivy League, and that started quite a while ago, is because a lot of these are the oldest schools in the country. And as such, they're known for these beautiful brick buildings with ivy growing on them. And that is why they started calling them the Ivy League. It really is just an athletic conference, but it's come to be more about the academic prestige that's involved. But technically, it's just an athletic conference. And if anybody follows college sports, it's not the best athletic conference that exists. But still, that is exactly what they were named for. What are the similarities between the schools? Well, they're all prestigious. They are all academically challenging. Academic rigor is something they are very well known for. They have gorgeous historic campuses. Like I was saying earlier, they're known for brick buildings and ivy and just, a lot of students, years ago, they don't say this quite as much now, but years ago they would say, oh, they look like, Harry Potter and that kind of thing. They're beautiful and look like, a lot of the buildings look like castles or look like something that you don't typically see. They're located, all of them, in the Northeast. They're all private. They all have low acceptance rates, and all of them have very large endowments and are extremely generous with financial aid, but none of them offer either merit or athletic scholarships. So whenever, every once in a while, I'll talk to someone and they'll say, oh, well, I know someone who got a full ride to, Harvard. And sure, you can get a full ride, but none of it is merit based, right? All of it is 100% demonstrated financial need. And they are all known to provide 100% of demonstrated financial need without loans. That doesn't mean you can't get loans, but their packages, don't really include loans. So those are all the similarities. What are the differences? Well, the location, right? Like they're not all in the exact same place. The size of schools. Some people get confused and think that Cornell is an easier Ivy to get into, but that's not really the case. What people don't realize is that Cornell has a special cooperative agreement with the state of New York to take New York State, residents, right, and act as a public school in that context. And so they do have a larger student body, and it is a larger campus because of that. But for students who are applying from out of state, it's still, really hard to get into. They have different programs that they offer. They're known for different things. They have different residential life. The way that they're set up academically is very different. Some of the schools have, like Columbia, they're well known for their core curriculum where everybody has to take this core curriculum. And then you have a school like Brown where it's an open curriculum and you can just pick whatever classes you want to take and kind of go down your own path. They all have different activities, clubs, and really even culture. They're all very different, which is why we kind of feel like the strategy, and this is a strategy for some people, we kind of feel like the strategy of applying to all 8 Ivies isn't necessarily a good one because they really consider fit very heavily in their admissions process, right? And obviously, based on all these differences, not every kid is the right fit for every Ivy. So it's important, we think, to pick the schools that match kind of what the child has to offer. Okay, so what are the Ivy League schools looking for? And no, they are not looking for people who can, who have solved world peace or, cured some, like disease or something like that. That's not what they're looking for. They're not looking for kids who are, I don't know, impossible to, like they're not looking for some impossible standard. They do, however, have high standards. So what are they looking for? They're looking for a well-rounded class that's diverse and filled with students who are exceptional in all kinds of areas. Obviously, um, they want students who are going to come and bring something to their campus, and so they like the idea of finding students who aren't just only academic, right? They're looking for students who have, you know they're always looking for the rigor, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but they like to have students from all over the country and all over the world. They like athletes, they like students who have come from underrepresented groups, maybe who've experienced disadvantages and overcome them, first generation students. They love artists, musicians, thespians. They're very into the special talents and interests that students have, and they really do love to hear about special situations and good stories from students who have maybe overcome obstacles or done something that that they value and want to see on their campus. Okay, so the right fit, I mentioned this earlier. So what is the right fit? So institutional fit. So that's really important to these schools, and it is really a big driver in the admissions process. And they want to look and see, is the school a good academic match? Is the student going to come and contribute to campus life? Are they going to meet the college's institutional priorities? And those priorities vary, so it's you have to kind of take that into account. Do they share the school's core values? And in order to know that, you can look up their core values. It's usually in their mission statement. It's not a hard thing to find, but when you're considering fit for your student or for you as a student, you should look at all of those things and determine whether or not this school is a good fit for you. Colleges are always concerned about what's called yield, and that means the number of students that actually commit, and then fit. Those two things are of primary importance to every college, but in particular to Ivies, in especially the fit part. So what's the most important factor for Ivy League admissions? If I were giving this presentation in a school, I would ask this and have students answer. They almost always get it wrong, but the number one most important factor for Ivy League admissions is the exact same factor that is most important for all of college admissions, and that is grades and rigor. It's a combined thing. Okay, so the student transcript really is the most important thing. The Ivies in particular are looking for students to be taking a demanding, rigorous course load. They need AP classes, IB classes, dual enrollment, A levels if they're participating in the ACE program. That is if these classes are offered at their school, right? They're not going to be held accountable for classes that aren't offered at their child's school, right? But if these classes are there, they expect a student who wants to go to the Ivies, they expect them to be taking these kinds of classes, the hardest classes available to them. They also expect them to be doing well. It's not enough to just be taking the classes, but they need to be doing well. They need to take core classes all 4 years of high school. They're looking for students who are choosing academic electives rather than, doesn't mean they can't take some fun things, but as a general rule, the majority of the time taking these academic electives is really important. They're looking for 3 to 4 years of a foreign language. I always tell students that, in terms of, academics, more is always better for these schools, right? Like it's if you've taken 2 years of a foreign language, that might be the minimum requirement, but more than that is always better. And it's the same. There's a lot of school districts that require to graduate from high school like 3 social science classes and history and other things like that, but taking 4 years of that is better. Okay, standardized tests. This is a huge question right now, and it has been a big question ever since the pandemic. If you weren't paying attention to college admissions during the pandemic, I can tell you, we went from every school requiring tests for the most part to no schools requiring tests except for the state university system in the state of Florida. So It's important to note, though, that most of the Ivies and many top universities are no longer test optional each year, starting with, starting a couple of years ago. Each year, we've seen more and more schools go back to testing. They give a lot of different reasons for that. One of them is that they believe that this is a good indicator of how students are going to perform in college. Technically, right now, Columbia is the only Ivy that is test optional. They did announce a policy that looks like it might be in perpetuity, but we will see. The wording on it's a little wonky, so it's hard to tell. Even if a school is still test optional, strong scores can make a difference. And one of our big things, especially with these upper tiered universities that are indeed still test optional, and there are lots of those still, is whether or not, like, we help students strategize whether or not to submit their test scores. We are finding that, test scores, when we do submit test scores, if they fall within the range that schools are looking for, that's always a help rather than a hindrance to students. But there are some exceptions to that. So that's why talking about it and going through it is a big part of what we do. There's really no sort of one size fits all for that. Standardized test scores for the class of 2026. I tried looking this up for the class of 2027, but it was not available. So this is what we have. But if you look at them, these are really high scores, right? So these are some of the higher scores that you can possibly get. It is really hard for students to get these scores. So, they're all well, like into the upper percentiles of test takers in terms of scores. What else do they look at? Essays, right? They want a strong personal statement and supplemental essays. In the case of Ivy League schools and almost every upper tiered university that I can think of, they do have, in most cases, quite a few essays for students to answer, right? And they really are looking at both this personal statement where you can showcase yourself and showcase what makes you unique and special and what you have to offer. That's that personal statement. And then the supplemental essays give them insight into how well do you know the school? How well will you fit in with their values? And I guarantee you, if they're asking you questions about something, that's because they value whatever it is that they're asking you about. They're looking also for extracurricular activities. They're looking for extracurricular excellence. I tell families all the time, when you want Ivies or upper tiered universities, you want the trifecta. You need great grades, amazing test scores, incredible activities. Like, those are the things that are going to make you stand out in a good way. They're looking not for students to be involved in, 30 different things. They're looking for students to be deeply involved in a few things. So, that's why we tell families, you don't have to have, a huge, broad number of interests. Really, they're looking for depth. They're looking for you to show, to demonstrate, and I hate to use this word, but I'm going to use it, passion, right? It's an overused word, but in this case, it fits, right? They're looking for students to demonstrate passion in specific areas. They're looking for students to excel specifically in, one or a few areas, right? They want you to demonstrate your passion and show how you are doing more than just surface involvement. And they love to see students take what they love to do and turn it into something more, right? So I work a lot with students, and I'll give you a fun example. I had a student who, when I very first met him, the mom was like, all he wants to do is watch sports. And we turned that into something. Just so you know, that is possible. And we turned it into something really cool that was extremely beneficial and helpful in his applications. So If your child is obsessed with video games, I promise there are ways to take that and turn that into something deeper. So, a question that we get a lot is about demonstrated interest and why demonstrated interest is important. Demonstrated interest means showing specific or showing interest in a specific school. Best way to do that is to visit a school in person if you can, or online. Every school, just like, again, going back to the pandemic, when we first, when everything shut down to begin with, almost no schools had online information sessions or virtual tours. And within a couple of weeks, every school had them. And every school continues to have them. And it's great because students can get an idea of what schools are like, even when they can't go visit, which is, in person, which is great. A lot of times too, my students that do attend the online information sessions, they get actually frequently a almost one-on-one, contact and session with an admissions person, which can be really nice, right? Like, it's great for admissions people to get to know you as a student and an applicant. So that's always, I think, very beneficial. They have virtual college fairs that students can attend. There are also in-person college fairs. The biggest one is the NACAC one. It's been going on for forever. If you get a chance, they try to hold them regionally, all across the country. And if you get a chance to go, that's an excellent one. There are admissions webinars. There are even admissions webinars for specific areas of interest. So like, if a student is interested in business, a lot of times they'll have something about the business program at that school, or engineering, or different things. So there are even opportunities to talk online with a current student. Those are all things that students can do. How else can you show interest? You can follow schools on social media. You can repost things they share on social media. If you get emails from colleges, be sure to open, especially if they're ones of interest, be sure to open them and read all the way through, or scroll all the way through the emails. They do track those things. So each of these things is a touch point, and they do track these touch points. Larger schools, state universities don't always do this, but small private colleges, most of them track demonstrated interest. And the more interest you show, the better. So what comes next? What comes after all of this? The competition. Okay, there are 38,000 high schools in the country, which means there are 38,000 valedictorians, 38,000 salutatorians. Not every school calls their students, valedictorian and salutatorian, but every school has a number one and a number two. There are 38,000 senior class president. There are 14,000 Ivy League first year students. Harvard has 1,600 first year students. So obviously, not every student can be one of those 38,000 out of, hundreds of thousands of, or millions actually, of high school students, right? And not every student can be one of the 38,000 valedictorians or one of the 38,000 salutatorians. And a lot of times, if you're the senior class president, that kind of overlaps with one of these other things. So it is very competitive, and students need to know that. Students need to understand that there is a very small number, there are very few slots for a lot of students who want to go there. What can you do? You can apply early. I like to talk about, admissions deadlines in terms of like dating. Usually, there is early decision, which I call a proposal of marriage. It means that you are 100% committed to that school, because if you get in, you're going. Early decision application rates are much higher than other admission rates. Just look here. Dartmouth last year, or class of 2023, had an early decision acceptance rate of 19%, which is, quite a few more than their regular decision admission rate of 4.7. Restrictive early action it's a dating relationship, but it's a dating relationship that's sort of exclusive, but not completely. Meaning that if you apply restrictive early action, you are limited to the other schools you can apply to early. So you can't apply to another school early decision, and you can apply to only state universities early, right? So no other early action or early decision program by a private university. Like those are all excluded if you're applying restrictive early action. However, there is a much greater acceptance rate, 10% as opposed to 3.4%. This one's specifically at Yale, but most of those numbers are pretty similar across the board. So what else can you do? That's so much, there's a lot of information, there's a lot of competition. So what else can you be doing right now? Research and apply to other schools beyond the Ivy League. There are tons of amazing colleges and universities in this country, more than 3,000. And some of them even might feel in a lot of ways like the Ivies, but maybe they aren't. You really should have your students look into other schools that are a nice fit for them, not just, one kind of school. There are merit universities. University of Chicago gives a lot of scholarship money. Duke has some large scholarships that are available. Vanderbilt, Washington University in St. Louis, Notre Dame. Those schools are they're really academically competitive, but they also do offer some merit scholarships and opportunities. There's what they call the little Ivies, which is they're all in the Northeast. They're all, similar in age and in rigor and reputation to Ivies. Schools like Amherst, Wesleyan, Williams, they're all liberal arts. Colby, Bates, Bowdoin, Tufts, Hamilton, Connecticut College, Trinity, they're all Division III, smaller, more rural liberal arts colleges in the Northeast, except for Tufts, which is in Boston, so it's not rural. And Amherst is really close to Boston. It's not too far off. Keep a list of, we encourage students to keep a list of activities, honors, and awards. It never surprises me, but students always forget what they've done. If they did it in ninth grade, frequently they don't remember it. It's usually parents who remember all of this, but it's a good idea to kind of get them in the habit of keeping a list of activities, honors, and awards they've received. Half the time when I meet with a student for the first time, I ask them about, well, what honors or awards have you received in school? They draw a blank. Most of them don't know what to say. Usually their parents, though, no. Meet with the guidance counselor or school college counselor if you have one, whenever possible. I worked at large public high schools in Miami, and I can tell you that the students who, hounded me, who showed up at my office during lunch, who came to my office before and after school, those are made appointments with me. Those are the students that I really connected with and could help. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with, and the last high school that I worked at had 4,000 students, and I was the only college counselor for 4,000 students, which is, not even really humanly possible. I did as much as I could, but the ability to meet one-on-one with every student was just not possible. So those students who went out of their way to find me got my attention more. I tried to spread it around, but it was very difficult. So when you are in a situation, especially at a public school where they're larger and there's more students, meeting with your guidance counselor and school college counselor early is a great idea. We encourage students to use their summers wisely, whether it's working, a summer program, internships, test prep. I do want to say something quickly about summer programs. I get this a lot from families, if a summer, like, oh, what's the summer program? And, aside from a few very competitive summer programs, summer programs are really great for students to learn about what it is that they think they want to do, or to learn maybe that they don't want to do that thing, right? And it's also a great opportunity for students to kind of step outside their comfort zone, experience what it's like to live on a college campus. All of that is really valuable. But in terms of making a giant difference in admissions, with the exception of a few very specific, very, very selective programs, that's, that's not going to tip the scale, especially at an upper tiered university. However, the experience a student has and their expression of that experience can make a huge difference. So, it's like that program specifically, maybe not, but that experience absolutely can. Colleges love students who work. They love that work experience. It shows responsibility. It shows maturity, the ability to be on time and be accountable to someone else. And all of that. I mean, even I have families that ask me this, oh, even a fast food job? Yes, even a fast food job. All of those things show a maturity and accountability that not every student demonstrates. We do also recommend asking for teacher recommendations prior to the end of a student's junior year. When I'm working with public school students, I tell them you can ask them before the end of their junior year and then remind them again in the fall, because they're probably not, thinking about that and they have so many students to deal with. But asking ahead of time so that you're on a teacher's radar is always a great idea. It is a mistake to wait until the fall of your senior year when teachers are overwhelmed with recommendations they need to do. That is a mistake. So don't wait until it's too late. What else can they do? They can stay organized. It's so important that students stay on top of things and keep all of their information organized. Schools are doing a much better job of providing college planning software that can help with this. We really recommend using it. A lot of it's really good stuff. And it can be very helpful and very valuable for students in terms of staying organized. We encourage you to get help. Independent college advisors like me and like are available at our company. Tutors, college counselors. I do have a lot of families that say, oh, like, why would we hire a college counselor? And I always say, if your child was, needed help with math, you would hire a tutor. And if your child needed help with, reading, you'd hire a tutor. Well, if your child needs help with college admissions, think of us as like tutors or guides in that college admissions process. We also encourage students to banish self-doubt. There is no room in this process for, feeling negative about yourself. There's no room in this process for feeling like, woe is me, I can't ever get in anywhere. There is a college and the right college for every single student. There are so many out there, not just the Ivies, but all kinds of schools. And then we also encourage you to get excited about the college admissions process. And it is exciting. This is like a giant step toward a future for all of these students. I mean, it's one of the things I love the most about my job and the reason that I've done it for 25 years, because I love helping students get from where they are to where they want to be. It's extremely gratifying. And I love helping students make sure that this process is an exciting one. And all of us at ICC work really hard to do that. Because there is everything to be excited about in this college admissions process. I mean, obviously, it's stressful, but we try to help remove that stress and that worry, and focus on the exciting part, the end goal here. If you have questions, I actually did see that we had a few questions, so I'm going to go ahead and answer those. But this is time for questions, and also, if you want to schedule a free consultation, you are entitled to a 20-minute free consultation with me for attending this webinar, and I would love to do that. That is my email address and my phone number, or you can just contact us through our website. Okay, so first question is, Most students are considered in context of the school they attend and how they took advantage of the number of APs offered, etc. Any thoughts about how homeschoolers are considered in context of their school and holistic admissions would be appreciated. Okay, so this is very specific. What I can tell you is that homeschool students do very well in college admissions and have for many, many years. And we actually have a member of our staff who homeschooled all of her children, and they were wildly successful in the college admissions process. But they're in terms of what they're looking for, they want to see homeschool students digging deep with academics, digging deep with passions, those sorts of things. So that's kind of what they're looking for. In context of their school, they're looking at what choices they made in terms of curriculum, what classes they've taken. A lot of homeschool students now take advantage of dual enrollment classes and other opportunities like that. That's, really what they're looking for. And then the other question is, so even if the common data set says that a school doesn't consider demonstrated interest, should you still click on all emails, attend webinars, follow them on social media, etc.? So, I would say yes, because any touch point like that is especially attending, webinars or different things, that's your opportunity to talk to someone in admissions. And anytime you can put a face on a name, that's of benefit to you as a student. I also have students go, a step further. And when they attend a webinar, sending a follow-up email, that's always nice, things like that. Anything like that shows that student paying particular interest and allows that admissions rep to see them, that's a good thing. Which summer programs are the top tiers that we can look into? So, we do kind of reserve things like that for our clients to talk to them about, but there are definitely some programs, MIT has several, there are a few research programs that are pretty prestigious and things like that. Anything where the focus is extremely rigorous academically, that's, not a bad thing to be involved in. So somebody asked, are pre-college summer programs something that would stand out in a college setting? I'm not sure I understand what you mean by in a college setting. Do you mean, I'm guessing you mean in the college admissions process? What I said earlier, pre-college summer programs aren't necessarily super prestigious. Some of them are more challenging to get into than others, but really the big benefit in these pre-college summer programs is that experience of living on campus, experiencing what life's like on that campus, all of that. And that's the benefit in these. And then what students can can get out of these experiences, right? Like what they glean from that experience and how they share that experience in their written materials on applications. Those are all the benefits of these pre-college programs. Would dropping AP course their freshman year be counted as a negative for college admissions? No, I really don't think so. Most high schools only allow a student to take one, maybe two AP classes. And if a student dropped, unless they have an add drop period where they did it after one semester, it's not likely something that's going to show up on a transcript. If it does show up on a transcript, you can always use the additional information section, which just got shorter this year. It used to be 650 words. Now it's going to be 250, but you can still use that section to explain any discrepancy in the transcript or anything like that. Personally, if your child was struggling in an AP class their freshman year, and as a family you decided to have them drop that class and go into an honors class, good for you. Better that they do well in a lower class than do poorly in an AP. Do they consider kids with 504s or IEP plans? Absolutely. And just so you know, that is not anything you ever have to disclose in the college admissions process. Okay, you never have to reveal any kind of learning difference or any kind of IEP or 504 plan. That is something that, number one, colleges cannot ask you about that. And number two, it is up to the discretion of the student if they want to share about anything like that. I do have students who have overcome significant learning challenges, and we do talk about it. Colleges love that story of resilience, though. And they don't judge kids because they have a 504 or an IEP. But again, that is not something that is ever revealed in the college admissions process unless a student chooses to reveal it. Once your child has been admitted and has enrolled in a college or university, then you can provide any kind of documentation so that your student can continue to get academic support if they need it. But in the admissions process, never. Colleges will never know that. My son is in 6th grade. Is it too early for a college counselor? If not, how can a college counselor help a 6th grader? So we actually do have families that start even that young. Really, when students are in 6th grade, they're not really active participants in the process, though, just to be, upfront. But we can help, especially with a child who is really excelling academically. There are lots of things they can do. They can take high school classes while they're still in middle school. We have lots of students that advance in science and math in particular, and also in world languages. So we can help with that. We can also help with, planning for summers. Maybe they need to be involved in enrichment programs that can help them in terms of developing interests so that when they are in high school, they're, kind of on a path where they have goals and things that they are pursuing. But really, we're not going to be meeting in terms of college counseling. We're not going to be meeting every month or anything like that. A 6th grader generally, their brain isn't thinking about college that specifically, but we do have families that really appreciate the support in terms of figuring out how to make the most of their middle school years so that when they are in high school, they have more, opportunities. What are the best SAT preparation places in South Florida or online? Again, this is really something that we share with families individually when we're working with them, but there are definitely great tutoring options. We have a lot of students who choose to do online now because it's much more easily accessible for them. So they do choose to go online more and more frequently. Also, some of the online tutoring companies are larger, and so they have more variety to choose from. There's also, though, really excellent in-person tutors that are in South Florida. If you want to have a meet and greet with me, I'm happy to share some information. But that's really more specific based on what it is that your student is looking for and that sort of thing. Would a CR, credit in lieu of a grade, is that like pass fail? Be looked down upon? I mean, it depends. If the school offers only that as an option, then no, of course it's not going to be looked down upon. I guess I need more context to understand that question, and I apologize. But as a general rule, pass fail, if that's what the class is offered as, that's not going to hurt a student. Is IB best of all, or STEM with high number of APs? Can it be just as good? The answer is yes. At a school where the IB program is offered, IB is considered the highest academic rigor at that school. However, having worked at a school that had, the IB program and then a very robust offering of AP classes, my students who did APs did just as well, and in some cases better than my IB students. So it's really kind of six of one, half a dozen of the other, and how you take advantage of what's offered. I will say this though, if you're going to go the AP route, you just need to make sure that your student is taking an equivalent number of APs as the student in IB is taking. And keep in mind that a lot of IB students and a lot of IB programs where they offer APs as well, they take, because IB is it's an 11th grade program, they take a bunch of AP classes in, usually it's 10th grade, 9th and 10th grade though. They do take some in 9th grade as well. So you have to keep that in mind. It says, I'm sure that a lot of people want to go to these schools because of prestige. How do admissions officers go about this? How do you make it clear that you are interested in the school beyond prestige? I always tell students, I mean, that's where, you know, all of the things we talked about, like the essays that you write, the, you know, the different activities that you've been involved in, all of those sorts of things. But I always tell students, you know, like I get a lot of students that are like, you know, Brown University has the most blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, they don't know. They know what they have to offer. They don't need you to tell them that. That's a clear sign that a student is only interested in the prestige, right? If they just, if that's the thing they focus on. So, you know, don't focus, you know, on just the prestige, right? When you're writing your essays or those kinds of things. And also prestige is not a great reason, a great solo reason to attend a college or a university. You know, I have a great example of that. I had a student who, when I very first met him, was Harvard, 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 Harvard. That was all he could think about. He went to visit it and hated it. He didn't like the campus. He didn't like that it was in Boston. He didn't like Boston. You know, like it totally changed his perspective. He is currently at the University of Florida and loving it. So, you know, just like it wasn't a good fit. And they're good at kind of weeding out who's a good fit and who's not. Somebody here says, my school gives me the option for A-level and AP classes, but also offers to take both. What should you do? If you are looking to go to an upper tiered university, the nice thing about the A-level or ACE program is you can complete it in 2 years. We recommend our students do that and then focus heavily on AP classes. You know, that's what we would recommend. So that's what I would say. I would say take them both. How many APs are considered good in all of high school? That depends on how many AP classes are offered and how many AP classes your student would do well in. That's not, there's no set answer for that. That varies. If a family has to move out of the USA to India for a few years, can you advise on what kind of courses or schools we can opt for in India so that a student has a good chance of getting into a good college in the USA when we come back? So that's, I mean, again, that's very specific. So I'd need to meet with you and find out more about what you're looking for. I will say that I have lots of students who get into US schools from all over the world. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. And then I'm going to start answering the questions in the chat because it looks like we have several of them. How do AP versus dual enrollment compare in terms of what colleges prefer? I love this question. This is such a great question. So if the high school offers an AP class in that subject area, colleges would much prefer to see a student take that AP class. High schools would prefer that students take that AP class. And in almost every scenario, colleges would prefer to see a student take an AP class versus a dual enrollment class, almost always. There are, you know, like there are schools that don't offer a lot of AP classes and dual enrollment is what they do. So then obviously, you know, if dual enrollment is all they offer, that's fine. Then colleges aren't looking at them, you know, less than. But at a school where dual enrollment is an active choice and they have a whole bunch of AP choices, they would prefer to see students take the AP classes. And someone thanked me for an informative session. You are very welcome. Okay, let's see. So it says, oh, there's one of these questions that's here. That was already answered in the other. So I'll just do this. And we are getting close on time, but it says, um, is it better to self-study for easier APs and take the AP exam and take other honors courses that align with students' future major choices? So this is the thing. In terms of grade point average, the AP classes are better than honors, right? They are. They're more rigorous. They're more difficult. I would say in terms of pursuing an interest in a future major choice, you're better off finding ways to do that outside of school if there's a choice between doing an AP or doing the career interest. Or you can take AP classes, over the summer if that's possible, or that kind of thing. So I would say, you know, I mean, I do have students that self-study for APs because they're taking a whole bunch of APs, but there's a subject that they couldn't take the class in, or maybe it's not offered at their school, but they think they can do well in it. And so then they self-study. Somebody said, is there a good website to search for schools based on personal criteria? For example, political science, large schools, suburban Greek life, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I like the College Board's Big Future website. It's really pretty comprehensive and they do really very well. But I mean, even just a Google search would probably be helpful. Would you recommend taking all higher level IB classes or only do so if you guarantee all A's? I mean, IB requires for the diploma, they require you to take a certain number of higher level classes. I would say if you, I mean, and most schools aren't going to let you take all higher level, but most high schools aren't going to do that. I would say to take more higher level classes if you're capable of doing well in those. That would always be a good idea. So somebody asked, what is financial need for an Ivy League? Is there a definition? Every school has a different formula that they use. For example, just the other day, Harvard announced that students from families that make $200,000 or less will get full, financial assistance. So there's that. But every one of them is different. They're all very generous, though. Somebody said, can you please give a ballpark of the cost of hiring a college counselor over a typical student? This is really challenging. I can't really answer that. Again, there's no set answer. We offer different packages, different, with different costs and all kinds of other things that are involved. So really it's on an individual basis that we assess something like that with a family. Somebody said, where do you pursue self-study for an AP class? I mean, I love like Florida virtual school. I love, I love other online, programs that students can learn from. There's edX and Coursera where students have a whole host of free options available to them. There's all kinds of ways that students can self-study. So, sometimes they just buy the textbook and go through it. Somebody just said, if the school doesn't offer AP, I think I'm going to finish with this one because we're getting close here. If the school doesn't offer any AP classes, how many AP exams are needed to get into top 20 schools? And do you have to get 5s for all of these? If the school doesn't offer any AP classes, a student is not accountable for AP exams, right? Like if you don't have that as an option, they're not holding you accountable, for things that the school doesn't offer, right? So academically, they're comparing in terms of classes and rigor and curriculum. They're really only comparing students with what's offered at their own school, right? So if you're at a school that doesn't have AP classes, then, they don't expect them to have AP exams. Now, going beyond what the school offers and showing, that passion and that, pursuit of something more, that's always a good thing and always looks really good. Somebody just said, what is better to have APs, A's, or A-level classes? I'm not I'm not sure I understand. Do you mean what's better, APs or A level classes? I mean, again, at a school where you have both APs and A levels, you can do both, right? And I would choose to do both. AP is definitely more widely recognized, but ACE has been around now for a while, and colleges are really starting to recognize it more. So if you have those two options available to you, I mean, I say, you know, take advantage of that. Okay, and then this is the final question. What is a good grade for an AP? Must be a 5. Do you mean an AP exam? So that's the AP exam score. I mean, again, there's a lot of strategy involved in this, so it's hard to just answer in a blanket. And like my colleague said, our college counseling approach is highly personalized. Um, so it's difficult to really answer that question completely, because sometimes students don't get 5s on an AP exam, but as a general rule, obviously the better you do, the better that is. um I guess that's kind of the best way to answer that. We do want to thank you for joining us tonight. This has been a great session. I loved all of these questions. We don't always get that many questions, but I actually really appreciate all of the thoughtful questions. And hopefully you learned something tonight, and I have certainly enjoyed hosting you. Have a great evening. And if you are interested in that, the meet and greet, let me know. You can email me directly, or again, you can contact contact us through our website. You will also be receiving a follow-up email after this presentation. And you are all very welcome. It has been my pleasure to host tonight.